There is something deeply seductive about hidden knowledge. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't demand attention like entertainment or politics. It whispers. It hints. It makes you feel like you've stumbled onto something that wasn't meant for everyone. And that feeling alone can change you. First, it feels empowering. You discover ancient symbols, sacred geometry, hermetic principles, lost philosophies. You start noticing patterns in media, religion, culture, psychology. Coincidences feel less random. Conversations feel layered. The world begins to look coded. And for the first time, you don't feel like you're just existing inside reality. You feel like you're seeing through it. That's the hook. That's how it begins. But here's what nobody warns you about. Seeing through the illusion does not automatically make you stronger. Sometimes it destabilizes you. We've been sold a romantic version of awakening. The lone seeker, the awakened mind, the one who escapes the matrix and returns with truth. It's portrayed as light breaking through darkness, clean transcendence. But real awakening is not clean. It's disruptive. Because when you start dismantling illusions, you are not just dismantling society's structures. You are dismantling the psychological structures that gave you stability. Beliefs are not just ideas. They are anchors. They organize your perception. They stabilize your identity. They give you narrative coherence. When those anchors dissolve too quickly, the mind does not immediately feel liberated. It feels ungrounded. I remember when curiosity first turned into something heavier. It started innocently, reading about ancient mysticism, exploring esoteric symbolism, diving into philosophy that challenged mainstream narratives. It felt like intellectual expansion, like growth. Late nights became normal. Every answer opened 5 new questions. I felt alert, alive, engaged. But slowly, something shifted. Conversations with friends began to feel shallow. News cycles felt scripted. Social interactions felt performative. I started noticing unconscious patterns everywhere. Conditioning, archetypes, power dynamics. At first, that awareness felt sharp. Then it started to create distance. Instead of being present with people, I was analyzing them. Instead of experiencing life, I was decoding it. And decoding life is not the same as living it. That was the first hidden cost. When perception expands without emotional integration, it creates separation. You begin to feel different, not necessarily superior, at least not consciously, but apart. There's a subtle psychological inflation that can occur. You've seen something others haven't. You've questioned what others accept. You've deconstructed narratives most people still operate within. That awareness can quietly transform into identity. The one who sees, the one who knows. And that identity is dangerous. Because once awareness becomes identity, you are no longer just exploring truth. You are protecting your position within it. And protection breeds rigidity. You start filtering experiences through a lens of suspicion. You interpret disagreement as unconsciousness. You see naivety where there might simply be innocence. Empathy slowly gives way to analysis. Compassion turns into commentary. And you call it clarity. But clarity without humility is distortion. Another cost begins to emerge here, subtle but powerful. Trust erodes. Not just trust in institutions. Trust in people. Trust in shared narratives. Trust in simplicity. You start feeling like you're walking through a world of masks. Everything feels layered. Everything feels hidden. And when everything feels hidden, safety decreases. The nervous system does not distinguish between philosophical deconstruction and existential threat. If your worldview becomes unstable, your biology reacts. You might notice it subtly. Increased restlessness, difficulty relaxing, a background hum of tension. Sleep patterns shift. Conversations feel draining. You don't feel broken. You feel awake. But the body may be interpreting your awakening as danger. And that's rarely discussed in esoteric spaces. Awareness expands cognitively long before it stabilizes emotionally or physically. The mind can open overnight. The nervous system cannot. This creates a gap between perception and capacity. And inside that gap, people can fracture. There is also grief in awakening. Grief for the simplicity that once existed. Grief for the unquestioned world. Grief for the version of yourself that felt more certain. You may not label it as grief. You may call it evolution, but something has been lost. Innocence does not return once deconstructed, and that loss deserves acknowledgement. Instead, many seekers push forward aggressively. More knowledge, more decoding, more hidden layers, as if the solution to destabilization is further intensity. But intensity without integration compounds fragmentation. And here's a difficult truth. Esoteric knowledge amplifies what is already within you. If you carry insecurity, it can inflate into superiority. If you carry fear, it can morph into paranoia. If you carry unresolved trauma, it can reinterpret truth through distortion. Knowledge itself is neutral, but it magnifies the psychological structure holding it. This is where the hidden cost deepens. Because once you see beyond the surface, returning to ignorance is impossible. But learning how to remain grounded within expanded awareness is not automatic. It is a skill, and no one teaches that skill when you first fall into the rabbit hole. They teach symbols, they teach philosophy, they teach cosmology, but they rarely teach stability. And without stability, awakening becomes volatile. This is the part of the journey few people talk about publicly. The quiet destabilization, the subtle isolation, the internal tension between seeing more and feeling less connected, the creeping sense that the world hasn't changed, but you have, and you're not entirely sure whether that change is making you wiser or just more alone. There's a moment in this journey that almost everyone experiences, but very few admit. It's the moment when awareness turns heavy. At first, hidden knowledge feels like light, illuminating structures, exposing illusions, revealing patterns. But slowly, that light begins to reveal something else. Shadow, not just in the world, in you. Because the deeper you look into systems of manipulation, power, deception, unconsciousness, the more you begin to confront your own participation in them. And that confrontation is uncomfortable. It's easy to critique society. It's harder to examine your own motives. It's easy to dismantle institutions. It's harder to dismantle ego. This is where many seekers hit their first internal crisis. They expected awakening to feel expansive. Instead, it feels destabilizing. You begin questioning everything. Your beliefs, your relationships, your career choices, your identity. You start wondering, how much of me was constructed? How much of my personality is conditioning? How much of my ambition is programming? These are powerful questions, but without grounding, they can become corrosive. Because when you question everything at once, you remove psychological support beams faster than you can rebuild them. And humans need structure. Even if that structure evolves, it cannot vanish overnight without consequence. There is also a social cost. When your worldview shifts dramatically, your relationships feel the tension. Conversations become strained. You either censor yourself to avoid conflict, or you express your insights and feel misunderstood. Both create distance, and distance accumulates. You may start feeling like you're living in two realities. The external world continues as usual, routines, work, social norms. But internally, you feel like tectonic plates are shifting. That internal-external mismatch can be exhausting. You smile in public while internally questioning existence. You engage in small talk while contemplating metaphysics. You attend gatherings while observing unconscious patterns. Creates a subtle loneliness, not because people reject you, but because your inner landscape feels unshareable. And when experiences feel unshareable, isolation grows. This is where the second major hidden cost emerges. alienation, not from society alone, from yourself. Because when you dismantle identity layers too quickly, you don't immediately discover your true self. You encounter ambiguity, uncertainty, fluidity, and while fluidity sounds spiritual, prolonged ambiguity without grounding feels unstable. You might ask, if I'm not my conditioning, then who am I? If society is constructed, what is authentic? If belief systems are limited, what do I stand on? These are advanced psychological questions, and most people stumble into them without preparation. There is a reason ancient traditions approached hidden knowledge slowly. Initiation was gradual, guided, structured. There were teachers, rituals, community containers, because powerful insight without containment can overwhelm the psyche. Today, information is instant. You can access advanced metaphysical concepts at 2 a.m. alone in your room. No mentor, no integration process, no grounding practices, just raw exposure. And raw exposure is not initiation. It's overload. Another shift begins to happen here. Suspicion increases. You start seeing agendas everywhere, power dynamics everywhere, manipulation everywhere. And while some of that perception may be accurate, constant hypervigilance exhausts the nervous system. When you feel like reality is layered with hidden motives, you stop relaxing fully. You scan, you analyze, you interpret. Your baseline state becomes alertness. But chronic alertness is not enlightenment. It's stress. And stress changes perception. You begin interpreting neutral situations as loaded. You assume subtext where there may be none. Your mind becomes very good at pattern recognition, sometimes too good, because pattern recognition without calibration leads to false positives. This is where paranoia can quietly creep in. Not dramatic conspiracy thinking, subtle mistrust, subtle distancing, subtle emotional withdrawal. You may tell yourself you're just being discerning, and discernment is important. But discernment without emotional regulation becomes rigidity. You start filtering people based on intellectual alignment. You withdraw from spaces that feel unaware. You narrow your environment, and narrowing can feel safe, but it also reduces exposure to difference, which reduces growth. Another internal tension forms here. Part of you feels expanded. Another part feels contracted. Expanded in awareness, contracted in connection. And that contradiction creates fatigue, because holding expanded perception while navigating ordinary life requires energy. It's like running complex software on outdated hardware. Eventually, something lags. For some, it becomes anxiety. For others, depression. For others, irritability. And often, they don't connect it to their intellectual journey. They think something is wrong with them, but nothing is wrong. They just open doors faster than they built foundations. Here's something even more uncomfortable. Sometimes hidden knowledge becomes a shield, a way to avoid vulnerability. Instead of saying, I feel hurt, you analyze power dynamics. Instead of saying, I feel insecure, you discuss archetypes. Instead of admitting confusion, you reference philosophy. Knowledge can become armor, and armor is heavy. The irony is this: the deeper the knowledge, the easier it becomes to avoid raw emotion. You can explain suffering without feeling it. You can decode trauma without healing it. You can intellectualize loneliness instead of admitting it. And that creates internal fragmentation. The mind becomes sophisticated. The heart remains guarded. That imbalance cannot sustain itself indefinitely. Eventually, something demands integration, a breakdown, crisis, an exhaustion point, or a quiet realization that despite all the awareness, you don't feel peaceful. And that realization can be humbling, because it forces you to confront the possibility that awareness alone is not transformation. It is only the beginning, and beginnings are rarely stable. At some point in this journey, a subtle shift becomes necessary. You realize that accumulating insight is no longer enough. You've read, analyzed, deconstructed, questioned, but something inside whispers, "Now what?" Because awareness without integration becomes weight, and weight eventually demands balance. This is the turning point most seekers don't expect. They assume the path is upward. More knowledge, more truth, more layers revealed. But the real transformation begins when the direction changes. Not upward, inward, and downward, into the body, into the nervous system, into lived experience. Integration begins when you stop trying to escape the world and start learning how to exist within it consciously. That sounds simple. It isn't, because earlier awareness may have made you feel separate. Observing systems, observing conditioning, observing unconscious patterns. But integration asks something different.
Participation. Conscious participation.
You are not here to hover above reality analyzing it. You are here to live it without being consumed by it. That distinction changes everything. The first sign of integration is humility. Not intellectual humility, existential humility. You realize you don't need to decode every structure. You don't need to expose every illusion. You don't need to win every philosophical debate. You begin to value peace more than being right. That shift is massive, because earlier awareness might have felt like power. Now it feels like responsibility. Responsibility for your emotional state, your reactions, your projections, your nervous system regulation. You begin asking different questions. Instead of, "Is this system corrupt?" you ask, "Why does this situation trigger me?" Instead of, "Why are people unconscious?" you ask, "What part of me still reacts unconsciously?" This is uncomfortable, but this is real growth. Integration also softens hypervigilance. Earlier, your mind scanned for hidden agendas. Now you start scanning for your own assumptions. You notice when your body tenses, when your breath shortens, when your thoughts accelerate. You realize awakening isn't about decoding the world. It's about stabilizing yourself within it. And stabilization requires embodiment. That means sleep matters, nutrition matters, movement matters, breathing matters, relationships matter. Spiritual insight cannot replace biological regulation. The nervous system does not care how many esoteric texts you've read. If it feels unsafe, it reacts. So integration brings you back to basics. You begin grounding practices, not as spiritual performance, but as maintenance. You reduce consumption of overwhelming information. You curate your inputs. You recognize that your mind is an ecosystem, and ecosystems require balance. Another powerful shift happens here. You stop needing others to wake up. Earlier, you may have felt urgency, wanting friends, family, society to see what you see. That urgency carried tension. Now, something softens. You realize awakening cannot be forced. It unfolds when someone is ready. You stop arguing. You stop preaching. You stop trying to convert. You focus on living well. And ironically, that has more impact than debate ever did. Because embodied calm is contagious. People feel regulation. They feel grounded presence. And that presence communicates more than ideology. Integration also brings you back to ordinary life with new eyes. Work is no longer a battlefield of systems. It's an arena for self-observation. Conversations are not tests of awareness. They are opportunities for connection. You learn to speak simply, without jargon, without superiority, without coded language. Clarity becomes more important than complexity. You realize that depth does not require obscurity. Another major sign of integration: you can enjoy life again. Earlier, awareness may have made everything feel heavy. Now, lightness returns, not because you deny reality, but because you no longer carry it alone in your mind. You accept that the world is layered, imperfect, complex, and you don't need to fix it entirely. You can contribute without controlling. You can care without collapsing. You can observe without detaching. That balance is maturity. Integration also dissolves the identity of the awakened one. You stop defining yourself by insight. You stop measuring others by perception. You stop needing to feel different. You become comfortable being human, laughing, making mistakes, feeling emotions without analyzing them instantly. You allow yourself to be imperfect, and that is freedom, because the ego can hide inside spirituality, can say, I see more, I understand more, I'm beyond this. But integration gently dismantles that hierarchy. You see that everyone is navigating something. Everyone carries unseen battles. Everyone is evolving at their own pace. Compassion deepens, not abstract compassion, real compassion, the kind that listens, the kind that doesn't correct immediately, the kind that sits with discomfort without turning it into theory. Another important shift. You start differentiating between insight and obsession. Earlier, research might have been compulsive. Now you ask, is this expanding me or dysregulating me? You become selective. You recognize that not every hidden truth needs your attention. You protect your mental clarity. And that protection is strength, not avoidance. Because discernment evolves. It becomes less about external agendas and more about internal balance. Eventually, something subtle emerges. Peace, not constant bliss, not permanent clarity, but a stable baseline. You can encounter disturbing information without spiraling. You can hear opposing views without feeling threatened. You can question systems without losing sleep. That stability is integration. And from that place, something beautiful happens. Curiosity returns without urgency. You explore because you're interested, not because you're searching for identity. You learn because you enjoy growth, not because you feel incomplete. You realize awakening was never about escaping illusion entirely. It was about relating to it consciously. And that realization grounds everything. The world remains imperfect. Structures remain complex. Humanity remains flawed, but you no longer feel destabilized by that. You have become internally anchored, and anchored people don't need constant validation. They don't need to prove awareness. They live it quietly, consistently, and that consistency transforms more than intensity ever could. There is a stage of awakening that no one talks about, not because it's secret, but because it's quiet. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't feel explosive. It doesn't come with revelations or cosmic metaphors. It feels normal, and that normality can feel almost disappointing at first. After all the deconstruction, after all the questioning, after the intensity of realization, you expect something extraordinary. Instead, you find yourself doing ordinary things, but with a different nervous system. That is the difference. You still wake up. You still work. You still navigate relationships. You still experience stress. But the internal relationship to it has changed. Earlier, awakening felt like pulling back the curtain. Now it feels like standing calmly on the stage, participating without forgetting. The illusion hasn't vanished, but your entanglement with it has softened. You understand that systems will exist. Power structures will exist. Manipulation will exist. Human blindness will exist. But so will kindness. So will beauty. So will spontaneous goodness. And here's something important. When you were earlier in the journey, your attention may have been magnetized toward distortion. Now, your perception becomes balanced. You see shadow, but you also see light. Not in a naive way, in a regulated way. You no longer scan the world for confirmation of corruption. You scan for coherence, for alignment, for grounded people, and you become one of them. Another quiet shift happens here. You stop identifying as someone breaking free. You simply live free internally. Freedom becomes subtle. It shows up as not reacting immediately, not absorbing others' chaos, not arguing when silence is wiser, not needing control. You can sit in uncertainty without rushing to define it. You can hear misinformation without feeling compelled to dismantle it instantly. You can witness unconscious behavior without internal collapse. Because you are no longer trying to win against illusion. You're rooted in awareness, and rooted awareness is stable. Here's the paradox. At the beginning of the journey, you may have felt separate from the world. Now you feel part of it again, but differently. You don't feel superior. You don't feel alien. You don't feel detached. You feel integrated. You understand that everyone is navigating layers of conditioning, including you. You still have blind spots. You still have reactions. You still have ego patterns. But instead of being ashamed of them, you work with them. This is maturity. Awakening that rejects humanity is incomplete. Awakening that includes humanity is whole. You stop chasing higher states. You focus on consistent presence. Presence while speaking. Presence while listening. Presence while eating. Presence while resting. Presence while feeling uncomfortable. And something beautiful unfolds here. Life becomes less conceptual, more direct. You experience moments without immediately analyzing them. You laugh without dissecting why. You feel sadness without turning it into a philosophical thesis. You allow experience to move through you. That fluidity is freedom. Earlier, knowledge was something you carried. Now, it's something you embody. You don't need to reference texts to feel grounded. You don't need validation from intellectual circles. You don't need constant stimulation. You become comfortable with silence. And silence stops feeling empty, feels complete. There's also a deeper realization that settles in. The world has always been layered. Throughout history, there have been cycles of ignorance and awakening, control and liberation, collapse and renewal. You're not witnessing something entirely new. You're participating in an ongoing human evolution. And that realization removes the pressure. You are not responsible for fixing everything. You are responsible for regulating yourself. And from regulated individuals, healthy systems slowly emerge. It's not dramatic. It's incremental, but it's real. Another final shift. Compassion replaces urgency. Earlier, you may have wanted to wake people up. Now, you hold space for their timing. You understand that forcing awareness can destabilize. You trust that experience teaches more effectively than argument. You speak when invited. You remain silent when not. That restraint is strength. You also develop a deeper relationship with uncertainty. Instead of needing definitive answers about reality's nature, you become comfortable with mystery. Mystery stops feeling threatening, feels expansive. You don't need to know every mechanism of existence to live meaningfully within it. You don't need to decode every layer of illusion to act ethically. You don't need to dismantle every structure to cultivate integrity. You live aligned regardless of the system, and that's powerful, because true freedom isn't escaping the maze. It's walking through it without losing yourself. At the end of this journey, something becomes clear. Awakening is not about rejecting the world. It's about relating to it without being psychologically imprisoned by it. It's about seeing distortion without becoming distorted. It's about feeling deeply without drowning. It's about thinking clearly without isolating. It's about holding awareness gently, not gripping it. And maybe the most profound realization of all, you were never completely asleep. You were learning. And you're still learning. There is no final state.
No permanent enlightenment badge.
Just deepening clarity, deepening regulation, deepening compassion, and quiet strength. So if you've walked through intensity, if you've felt destabilized, if you've questioned everything, if you've felt isolated, know this: the goal was never to escape reality. It was to become stable within it. And if you're beginning to feel calmer, more grounded, less reactive, more compassionate, then you're not losing the path. You're integrating it. And integration is where real transformation lives. Not loud, not dramatic, but lasting.